3 terrifying, true shark attack stories. Story number 1. Bull shark attack. Imagine having your arm torn off by a shark, almost bleeding to death, and then having your arm reattached in the hospital. Well, that's exactly what happened to 8-year-old Jesse Albergast in July of 2001. The day started peacefully at Pensacola Beach, Florida. Jesse and his uncle were enjoying the warm Gulf Coast water, swimming near the shore in what seemed like a safe depth of about 3 feet. However, they were not alone. The surface suddenly burst with splashing and blood as a shark bit the boy's thigh, released, and then seized his arm. Jesse's uncle instinctively grabbed the shark's tail and pulled, but the shark continued to hold on and shake from side to side. Then, in one desperate but heroic act, the uncle pulled back with everything he had and yanked the shark all the way out of the water and onto the beach. Its 8-foot body thrashed on the sand. It was a bull shark, one of the most dangerous species. The uncle called 911 and a rescue helicopter was sent. A park ranger, Jared Klein, was also dispatched to the scene as another beachgoer performed CPR. As the helicopter landed, Jesse was in grave danger of bleeding to death. He was experiencing extreme trauma and no longer breathing. His arm was severed from his shoulder, and the bite on his leg bled profusely. As the helicopter sped Jesse to the hospital, Ranger Klein noticed the end of the severed arm was lodged in the shark's mouth. Of course, he didn't want to risk his own hands or arms, so Klein drew his service firearm and shot 2 bullets into the bull shark's head. He then pulled Jesse's arm out of the shark's throat and rushed it to the hospital. The helicopter EMT later recalled, quote, "He was just pale white. Where his arm was missing was just meat and bone. His leg was just mangled. I highly doubted he was going to make it." But a heroic effort from the Pensacola Baptist Hospital Trauma Unit brought Jesse back from cardiac arrest and the brink of death. It took 20 minutes of chest compressions and fluid infusion to stem the bleeding. Medical staff were almost ready to halt life-saving efforts. Then a blip passed on the monitor. They had a heartbeat. And then Jesse's arm arrived at the hospital. The vascular surgeon later said he was surprised by how cleanly the arm had been severed. Perhaps this was because bull sharks can bite with 2 tons of pressure, and their teeth are like serrated knives. A team of surgeons began the daunting task of reattaching the arm and recovering circulation. The operation was successful, and Jesse survived. However, he suffered life-altering injuries that remain to this day. A brain injury resulted from blood loss. He was bedridden and required a feeding tube. Years later, Jesse transitioned to a wheelchair. And although he still struggles to communicate, this brave young man remains on the path to recovery. Story 2. It chewed her face. Lisa Mondi suffered a violent attack to her head and arm from a great white shark. This attack occurred off the coast of New South Wales, Australia in 2011. Lisa was enjoying herself, wakeboarding during her lunch hour. It was a beautiful afternoon out on the bay. A shark attack was the furthest thing from her mind. Lisa mistimed a maneuver on her wakeboard. She fell off her board and plunged into the ocean. But the timing could not have been worse. A 14-foot great white shark was lurking just beneath the surface. The shark seized her head, neck, and left arm. For a few terrifying seconds, it pulled her underwater. Lisa later recalled, "I couldn't see anything. The water was just red with blood." Her life jacket may have saved her life. It probably protected her from some of the teeth, and then allowed her to float to the surface quickly after the shark released her. 16 hours of surgery were required to stitch her face, neck, and arm. Lisa endured a torn-out artery and shredded muscles. There was extensive tissue damage and trauma. However, she eventually recovered feeling in her arm and a full recovery. Surprisingly, Lisa now advocates for the conservation of great white sharks. She has also bravely returned to the ocean to go cage diving with these fascinating creatures. "He may have turned my face to mince meat," Lisa says of the shark, "but I really don't blame him. It was just one of those things." Story 3. Death in Malibu. Malibu, California. It's a place that's known for beautiful weather, miles of scenic beaches, and a home to Hollywood stars. But Malibu was also the scene of one of the most terrifying shark attacks in California history. Our story begins in January of 1989 at a spot called Paradise Cove. 24-year-old Tamara McAllister and her boyfriend Jeffrey Stoddard were preparing for a triathlon. Their plan was to paddle several miles out to sea and around Point Dume to the north. Point Dume stretches far into the Pacific. It's home to a deep-water canyon and all kinds of sea life. This area also has a large population of seals and California sea lions. These marine mammals are a favorite food supply for great white sharks. Another beachgoer later recalled seeing thrashing in the water and seals fleeing the scene. Perhaps an unseen predator was just beneath the surface. Sadly, Tamara and her boyfriend were never to be seen alive again. Tamara's body was later discovered floating at sea. There were 6 bite marks that the coroner later attributed to a great white shark. The worst was a 13-inch gash on her thigh. The cause of death was blood and tissue loss. Stoddard's body was never found. Their kayaks were later found out to sea, overturned and lashed together. Puncture marks and other damages indicated a shark attack. We may never know exactly what happened, but here is some important evidence to consider. Tamara was wearing a windbreaker jacket when her body was discovered. That means she wasn't swimming. The coroner also reported that the back of her head was badly bruised. And yet another factor was the ocean itself. The wind and swell both came up drastically once they left Paradise Cove. So here's one possible scenario. As the ocean became stormy, Stoddard probably lashed the 2 kayaks together to cut down on the wake. And being the stronger paddler, he would have been out front. The typical feeding pattern for great whites is to approach the victim from below at a very high speed. This is followed by a devastating strike at the surface. Sometimes the shark and the victim are launched high in the air. Tamara may have been thrown backwards, striking her head hard on the back of her kayak. Stoddard would have been thrown forward, striking his head on the plywood hatch cover. The kayaks would have capsized, spilling the couple into the water, giving the shark another opportunity to strike. One or both may have been knocked unconscious. Judging from the radius of the bite marks on Tamara's hip, the shark was around 16 to 17 feet long. And although her body was found at sea, Stoddard's body was never recovered. It's possible, though unlikely, that he was consumed by the shark, perhaps even swallowed whole. It's more likely that Stoddard simply drowned, and his body was lost in the vastness of the ocean. We will never know for sure. Either way, this is one of the most frightening shark attacks in California history. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe for more scary stories of all kinds. And thanks for watching.